So I am Danielle. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I would like to welcome you all. We're really happy to have everybody here. I will let Margot and Colleen introduce themselves in just a moment. Firstly, I would like to start off by doing a land acknowledgement. So Hospice Simcoe would like to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe people include the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated in honoring the Indigenous and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I would like to take this time to just acknowledge the 215 children in British Columbia. We just can't even imagine the impact that this has had on our community. It is tremendous. Hospice Simcoe is constantly working towards reconciliation in our own way, trying to work very closely and take as many courses and things that we're able to. We recognize that there is a gap in service, and we are trying to actively work towards that, filling that gap as best we can. So thank you, everybody. Colleen, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, so my name is Colleen, and I'm one of the bereavement coordinators here with Hospice Simcoe. So part of my role here at Hospice is I oversee the teen portion of the Children and Teens program. So Danielle and I kind of felt like we had that up together. So when there's children or like teens that are 13 and older, then they would come speak with me, and we would kind of discuss how we could support them. So I want to thank you all again for joining us tonight, and we hope you're able to get whatever it is you're looking for out of this. So thank you. Margot, I'll pass it on.
Hi, I'm Margo LAMBOOY. I, in my professional career, was an educator, and most of that career was with the Simcoe County District School Board, where I worked with taught deaf and hard of hearing students. Since my retirement, I have hooked up with hospice here, these wonderful people, and I'm doing volunteer work in the Ended Beginnings bereavement support for pregnancy and infant loss, and also in the child bereavement section of things, and that is what we are speaking to tonight. I work one-on-one with children who are anticipating a loss or have had a death of someone important to them. And so that's what we're hoping to tie together tonight, some of that grief and how it can encompass bullying as well.
Thanks, Margot. I just want a few housekeeping things before we get started on our webinar. So there is a question and answer section at the bottom. We will do our best, Colleen and myself, to moderate any questions that come up from this webinar, and between the three of us work together to answer them as best as possible. Don't worry about your mic or your camera. Everybody is muted and cameras are off for this webinar. So if you have dogs barking or kids screaming, or you're just sweating because it's really hot outside, that's totally okay. We will have, Colleen and I will have our contact information at the end of Margot's slideshow, so you can take a photo of it with your phone, if you have any further questions or concerns after the webinar. What else? I guess too, Colleen explained her role. So I am a community care coordinator. So I work primarily with families and children pre-death. So after diagnosis, I do some children's bereavement. So I help support, Margot helps support our program. And so we work really closely together. So we will talk a little bit more at the end of the presentation, how you can get in touch with us and how you can get a referral if that's needed. Unless anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat box, the Q&A. I will let Margot share her PowerPoint. Thanks, Margot.
Can everyone see that? And I'm hoping the sound is good on that too. All right, here we go. The reason we're sort of talking about grief and bullying, I wanted to share a little bit with you at first what my session might look like with some of the kids that I see. They come to us for a variety of reasons. Maybe a teacher has noticed some behaviors. Maybe a parent is concerned. Maybe parents are grieving themselves and want to make sure their children are receiving some support with their grief. And so we might talk about whether the child has been involved in the process of illness or in with what has happened with the death. We might talk about what caused the death. I might spend some time giving information about it. If it was for cancer or for suicide, we would talk about some of those things that involve that. Sometimes, depending on the age of the child, we might talk about what being alive and what being dead means. We can talk about funerals and cremations. And then we move into identifying and talking about emotions, what they are thinking and feeling, and even working a little bit on what grief is, and then to normalize what they are feeling, that whatever they feel is normal. And from there, we might move into some memory building, build a memory box, photo opportunities, memorial work, and then we can discuss on how their relationship with their important person can continue even after death. So that's sort of what our sessions together will look like. So tonight, what I would like to talk to you about is children's grief and what it is and what it can look like. It's important for you to know how that looks in children. And then I hope to be able to tie bullying and grief together. And they're both very complicated topics, but I hope to leave you with a little bit of food for thought and maybe some questions, concerns, wonders, and see where we go from there. So children experiencing grief. I want to talk a little bit about what you might see when children are grieving. A teacher might have noticed some emotions or behaviors. Parents might be grieving a loss, want to make sure their kids are okay. Children may have been part of the whole process or may not have had any information about the illness or the manner of death or what has happened after that. And sometimes that's where we can give support. So grief is a healthy and normal response to loss, and it can describe the emotions one experiences after a loss or even in the anticipation of a loss. Children grieve differently than adults. Each child is unique. It depends on their age, their maturity level. They may sit in their grief for long periods of time, or they may be happy one minute and quite carefree the next. They don't tend to verbalize what's going on with them, but grief can affect their bodies. And often kids come and we're talking to them about headaches and tummy aches, or they can't sleep, or they're feeling anxiety. You might see some regression in behaviors. Some children might become more clingy after a loss. It's a range of reaction, and the reactions depend on the age and the relationship to their important person. And even that may be complicated. They may have been close to that person or not. They may even be feeling some relief that that person has died. Just to come away with the fact that there is no normal or right way for a child to grieve. So what might it look like in children? Well, children have many thoughts and feelings about what they are experiencing, and we'll talk a little bit about what this might look like. There could be shock and denial. They may think their person is not really dead or is coming back, and this helps them to block their emotions. They may feel disorganization and panic. They may feel their lives are out of control. They may have lost a parent or a caregiver. They may wonder who will look after them now. So we work with them to identify who is in their community and who cares about them, and to let them know that they are not alone. They might feel and show anger that their important person has left them, that their lives have changed. Maybe they've had to move. Maybe they have a new caregiver to look after them. Maybe their whole family dynamics might look different now. And we work with them to identify their emotions, and we validate that what they are feeling is okay. And we work on expression, healthy and appropriate expression of those emotions. Some children feel guilt. They might think that somehow they've caused the death. They might think, if I hadn't have said that, they wouldn't have died. They may be in a stage where they believe that thinking something makes it true. So we talk about that as well. They may exhibit sadness. They may be sullen, crying. And eventually, they come to an acceptance point. And once they have the chance to integrate and know that they will be okay. So adults are more easily able to identify and verbalize feelings, but children often express these feelings and thoughts through behavior. So now let's switch to bullying. They might seem like two very separate issues, but they can actually be quite connected. A loss and grief can put a child into a very vulnerable position, which puts them at risk to be bullied or to become a bully. So let's talk about what it is. And these come right from different websites on Kids Help Phone. I have them all listed at the end of this, but they're sort of the accepted definitions of bullying. And basically what it comes down to is that bullying is some form of aggression involving an abuse of power in relationships. It is recognized globally as a complex and serious problem. It can be seen as the abuse of power through unjustified and repeated acts of aggressive behavior intended to inflict harm. Bullying can be thought of as a relationship problem. Again, it is about power and the abuse of power. It is done on purpose and usually repeated, and often occurs between people close in age. So this comes right from the Kids Help Phone. I've jotted it down at the bottom there. So sort of the different kinds of types of bullying that you will see. The physical bullying that we see, harassing by hitting, shoving, tripping. Emotional or psychological bullying, which is harassment, verbal attacks, hurtful comments, name calling, teasing. This is a big one in our children's lives. Cyberbullying, harassing someone over social media, either by text, email, websites, other digital channels. They're on their phones a lot, and this is an easy way for bullying to happen. Social bullying is harassing someone by excluding them, spreading rumors, or giving them the silent treatment. And then there's discriminatory bullying, which is harassing someone based on their sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender identity, religion, or anything else perceived as making them different. And that's sort of the vein of thought I'm taking here tonight. So where can it occur? It can happen among family members, siblings, extended family, cousins, other adults in their family. It can happen among playmates, their friends, their social media friends, acquaintances. It can happen within social situations, clubs, after school activities, and at school it can happen in class and or during less supervised times, such as a lunch or recreational times. What can it look like? So it can be hidden or covert. So there you might see behaviors such as exclusions, spreading gossip or rumors, enforcing social isolations, things you don't really see. Or it can be overt bullying, which is easier to see. It includes behaviors such as verbal abuse, making fun, belittling threats, physical, verbal attacks, insults, and humiliation. Now that you have some information about what grief looks like and what bullying can look like, let's look at how the two can be linked. So during my one-on-one sessions with the kids, I might hear things like, "Oh, it was hard to go back to school. The kids made fun of me. They said mean things to me." Things like, "Well, your dad died because you're a crappy person," or "It's your fault, so-and-so died." Or perhaps the child is dealing with an illness such as cancer, and someone's making fun of them because their mom has lost their hair. You can now begin to see those grief reactions I went over before, the loss of control, the emotions like anger, sadness, feelings of isolation and aloneness, feelings of guilt, can be connected to being bullied or becoming a bully. So in our society, death is a curiosity and it can feel scary and mysterious to others. So bullying can be a way to distance oneself from that. Death's a curiosity, and a lot of children have not had to experience death and don't know what to say or how to react. Their parents may not know what to say or how to react. Bullies may feel jealous of the attention a grieving child may be getting as well. These are all sort of how it can connect. As a child who has experienced death, it makes them different and can make them a target. Why might a child who is grieving or anticipating a death turn to bullying? They might need to gain some control in their lives. When a loved one dies, family dynamics may change. They may have a different caregiver, they may have a different place to live now. So they may push to take the anger out on someone else who maybe is not as strong as they are. This might give them a sense of a feeling of control. They may exhibit this on to someone who's more helpless, and this gives them a sense of control. Death is scary, and it has not been normalized in our society. It's a strange event, and so many children don't have experience with this. They may crave attention. Maybe they're witnessing an extended illness. Their important person, perhaps their parent or their sibling, is getting all the attention. The caregiver might not have the same amount of time they had, or other family members might be grieving as well and may not be emotionally available to them. Someone may bully to improve their status in a social group. They may be feeling emotional pain, and inflicting that pain on someone else is relieving for them somehow. They may bully to avoid being bullied, or they may bully someone who has bullied them first. The signs are hard to detect, and this is where things get a little bit tricky. Signs that bullying is happening and grief reactions can actually look very similar. So what I'd like to do is share a video clip, and this video clip is from kidsgrief.ca, and I encourage you to visit this website. It's wonderful. It's a resource both for parents and for teachers, and talks a lot about what kids grief looks like and what to do, strategies to help with it. So this person is Andrea Warnick, and she is a registered psychotherapist, and she's an expert on children experiencing grief. And in this clip, she describes how you have to be a bit of a detective in determining what is going on with a child. I hope the audio works.
Margo, the audio is not working.
Okay. So,
Margo, if you click share screen, at the bottom it should say share sound. And if you click on that,
It says I'm
Avoid it.
screen sharing. I can do a new share.
Yeah, do a new share and then just press, I think it's on the bottom left-hand side,
Share
it'll
sound.
say share
Yeah,
sound. Yeah.
got it. And then start over
Yeah.
and share. All right. Let's try again. Sorry about that.
Sometimes it can be a challenge to figure out whether a student's behaviors are due to grief or whether it's due to other things that are going on in their life. It sometimes takes detective work. So the thing with grief in children is it can often look like a whole bunch of different things, and that's including sometimes like ADHD, learning disabilities, because grief can really interfere with kids of all ages, their ability to concentrate. Right? Like if your person's really ill and dying in your life or has died, try focusing on algebra. Right? It's not easy. And that's where I find that sometimes we've really got to take a look and be like, okay, before not just the death, but before maybe even this illness happened, right? Were we seeing any signs of this with the student? Or did behaviors really start changing at the time that this illness happened in the family? And then certainly the death happened. Right? That can sort of be a clue whether this is more grief specific, but if there were signs before, it might just be that the grief is magnifying what was already there.
So you have to kind of be the detective. And because signs that somebody is being bullied and signs that someone is experiencing grief can look very similar, you have to do a lot of talking with your child. So if somebody's being bullied, what do you see? You may see explosive behaviors, which we talked about. That could be part of a grief response as well. You may see unusual emotional responses. That can be because of grief as well. Some children hide their upset. Some will be quick to ask for help. Remember, I talked about maybe you will see someone being a little bit more clingy. That's with grief, but it's also with bullying. Many kids will be less likely to speak out, and they might be worried adults will make it worse. And so you have to kind of look at, were the behaviors there before the loss? Is this something new? Look for unexplained behavior or changes in academic performance. And you kind of have to put together the whole puzzle. So what can you do? Well, this is a very complicated issue, and there are no easy answers or solutions. I can offer you some strategies. Ask. If you are suspecting or noticing anything, you could ask, is anything bothering you? And sometimes the complaints can seem really small at the beginning to you, but they may be an indication of a bigger issue. Listen. It is really important to listen. There's something that is making your child feel left out or frightened. It is important for you to believe what you are being told. And then strategies to work against bullying and also to work with reactions to grief have to be a problem-solving approach. They are a shared concern. Bullying is a relationship issue. Grief is isolating, and so is bullying. Your child will feel alone. So what's the strategy? Well, a valuable tool in dealing with bullying and in working with grief is ask, what have you tried? What has worked? What can we try next? Do you have any ideas? Teach your child some strategies. And at the same time, educate them on why bullying happens. You could say, it's important to keep your cool because bullies want to make you upset. You could role play and practice saying, leave me alone in a cool way and practice walking away. You could look at 3 different scenarios or solutions where bullying can occur discuss the steps, and then encourage your child to stop and think of the 3 choices before choosing. You could encourage them to stay in a group. You could say, stay in a group. Bullies are a little more afraid to pick on groups than they are individual people. Help your child to understand that you may have to go up a step, that this is a bigger problem than they alone can handle. Go to school staff, and perhaps eventually you may even need to go to police. Keep your child informed of all the strategies that you are taking. So I'm going to show you another clip of Andrea Warnick. And although she is talking about teachable moments around grieving in this clip, I felt it also connected to the reason children might be bullied or become bullies by addressing how grieving can make you different and therefore a target. And Andrea Warnick talks about looking for those teachable moments and teaching the language of grief.
One really simple support strategy that's often overlooked is just helping kids develop the ability to talk about what's happening in their life or what's happened in their life. And that can be as simple as having the language for, my dad had a disease called ALS and he died from it. Or if a child says to the child in the schoolyard, well, why doesn't your mom have hair anymore? Being able to say, my mom has cancer and the medication she's taking made her hair fall out. So kids aren't left in a situation where they're asked questions that they don't know how to respond to. Because for some children, that can be really anxiety provoking. And so, this was really highlighted for me through a personal experience. My cousin's mom died when she was 5. And just recently, I was talking to her about it. She's in her 30s now. And she was saying, I was actually quite anxious growing up whenever it came to making new friends. And it wasn't because I was worried that they'd ask me about my mom and I had to say she was died. But the truth was, I didn't know how she died. And this was not on anyone's radar in the family. Nobody knew that she didn't know that her mom had died of cancer. And that was so anxiety provoking for her because she was really embarrassed that if somebody asked her how her mom died, she wouldn't know how to respond. But quite often I find that kids actually just won't have the language. Some kids just won't be able to say, my mom died or my dad has ALS. And so that's a difficult thing for them to navigate. And so one of the things I will always say to kids is, if somebody were to ask you where your dad is, how would you respond to that question? And that's particularly on my radar if kids are going to a new school. So it might be that they had a sibling who died, but the whole elementary school knew, but now they're going into a middle school where they're going to meet a lot of people who don't actually know. And so even though maybe 3 years have passed since the brother died, this might be the first time that they're actually in contact with a lot of new people where they might need to speak about their story and actually be able to narrate it. So when they're switching schools or going to a new camp, it's always on my radar. If you're meeting new kids who are asking you about this, or if kids say, well, how many siblings do you have? How are you going to respond to that? And just give them the language. And it's really important that we remember and that we teach kids that death doesn't end a relationship. So if a sibling has died, that child is still their sibling. They still count as a sibling. It doesn't mean if the 6-year-old kid meets a new friend, they have to talk about the fact that they've had a sibling die. It might just be in their head that they're actually counting that sibling. They may say, well, I've got one sister and not mention their brother. And that's completely okay, as long as that child is firm in the knowing that their brother is still their brother. Or when I have children who I'll overhear say, well, I don't have a dad anymore, I'll gently remind them, they do have a dad. Your dad has died, but your dad's still very much your dad and does not stop being your dad because he's died. I also want to make sure that kids have a way to safely and gently shut down a conversation if they don't want to talk about it. So if they have somebody who's asking about, well, you know what, I heard that your mom's sick in the hospital, And if the child doesn't want to talk about it, I'll often give them the language, I don't feel like talking about it, thank you. And just make it really easy for them to get out of the conversation. And this is something that should be on the radar of all caregivers of grieving kids, just making sure that they have the language to talk about it when they want to talk about what's happening and not talk about it when they don't. Sometimes kids will just try to avoid conversation. I've worked with some kids who, for years, throughout their entire schooling, they've avoided all conversations related to a parent or a sibling's death in their family, but at a cost, right? And it's anxiety provoking for them when those conversations come up, as opposed to there's other kids who very comfortably can talk about, you know, my dad died and he was shot by a gun, or my dad died, he had a disease called ALS. And it's very easy for them to speak about that.
And so if you give the kids the language to speak about what's happening in their lives, perhaps that will take away what might make them a target to become or to be bullied. And really, so what it comes down to is fostering healthy expression of emotions and thoughts in dealing with difficult relationships, in identifying the difference between feelings and behaviors, and in using acceptable responses. If you suspect your child is bullying, as we talked about before, educate. When bullying happens, talk about why bullying happens and how to handle emotions in a healthy way. Give alternatives, but validate. It's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to punch. You could punch your pillow instead. I know you are feeling alone and scared, but it is not okay to harass other people. Here are some ways we could work on making some friends. So you're acknowledging, you're working on developing healthy relationships, you're educating, and you're letting your child know that bullying can have serious effects like depression and hopelessness and feelings of isolation, and it's not deserved. Nobody deserves to be bullied. If you're not able to resolve things at the family level, or even if you are, it is really important to let school staff know what is happening. Not only about bullying, but also that there's an illness or grieving occurring in your family. And that way you can enlist the support of the school team, the teacher, administrator, special education teacher, the team. And that way they can share some of their strategies with you as well. All schools have a bullying protocol. If you need to pursue things at the school level, ask for a meeting with the teacher and with the administrator, the principal or vice principal, and work as a team to solve the problem. As it relates to grief, the teacher can do a lesson, and it doesn't even have to be about that particular child, but it could be a lesson on grief for the class. Because you can grieve as a result of any loss. We all have been grieving on some level or other about different things. It could be a divorce, a death of a pet, moving, your friend is moving. So teaching kids about grief on a class level might mitigate some of those differences that are occurring as well. You may need to take additional steps depending on the seriousness of the bullying, and that is perfectly okay and encouraged. Make sure you report it to the school. You may even have to go to the police. And it is encouraged to keep notes of what is happening, when and where. Keep texts, keep pictures, keep social media posts, keep screenshots. So to sort of pull it all together, grief and bullying do intersect. It's complicated. There are no easy fixes, but I hope I've left you with a few strategies. Know that grief reactions, all those emotions, those feelings of isolation, and bullying reactions can look similar, and work on problem solving together. Reach out for support at the school level and beyond if you need to. Don't sit in this alone. These are the resources of where I've pulled my information. Feel free to take a screenshot of that. Kids Help Phone is wonderful. Kidsgrief.ca has lovely modules for parents and for teachers. I can go back anytime if you need me to. And here's the contact information for Colleen and Danielle, the wonderful people I work with at hospice. And that's my presentation.
Thanks, Margo, so much. That's awesome. I really want to encourage people to ask questions in the Q&A, the chat box. I do have one question, Margo. Oh, somebody is wondering if you could go back to the resource slide. So if you could just go back a slide there, Margo. So one of my questions, Margo, is schools. So do they access bereavement support if a child or teacher or admin person dies during the school year? And if they do, what does that look like?
I know when I worked for the Simcoe County School Board, and I'm sure each school board has its own protocol for that. If a student died or a principal or a teacher or a staff member dies, they have a crisis response team. And that consists of social workers, special education teachers, and they go into the school for however long is necessary, and the students and the staff all have access to that. I know Simcoe County has 12 social workers. They have 29 child and youth workers. They have 2 First Nations, the Métis and Inuit workers. They have 5 psychologists, 5 attendance counselors, 2 mental health and addictions nurses, and probably those people would be grouped together into a team and be helicoptered into that situation until it was no longer needed.
Wow, that's really great to know. Oh, sorry, Colleen.
Nope, there's a question in the Q&A box. So it says, suggestion on how to open conversation with a child when you're questioning if the grief or bullying piece that is bothering the child, when you're unsure which may be bothering the child.
I think what I do during my one-on-one sessions, because of course a child doesn't come in with, okay, this and this and this and this and this is bothering me. You start with maybe they're having a lot of headaches or tummy aches, and we talk about, well, you know, our body can react to things we're thinking about. And so you might have a tummy ache because something is bothering you. And you might just have to start talking generally about a subject and then stop and listen and see what they throw back at you. And often they'll guide the way after that. You just have to be very open-ended at the beginning of a conversation. And then maybe even, I've noticed this or this, I've noticed you've been really upset lately. Is something bothering you? And it might start with, well, I'm not doing very well at school. Well, why do you think that is? And if you push a little bit further, well, because I can't concentrate. Well, what's making you not be able to concentrate? Well, I'm so worried about grandpa being sick, or Johnny's really pushing me all the time. And then all of a sudden, it'll all be in front of you. You have to start really general and then probe and keep picking at it until you get somewhere. Does that sort of answer it? Be general is my general answer.
That's great. Thanks, Margo. If you needed to make a meeting with a teacher or admin person and somebody was, let's say, doing online learning, from your experience, how would they go about doing that?
All teachers have emails now, so you could send an email with a CC to an administrator. Please, I'm worried. I need to set up some kind of meeting to problem solve this. The phone is your friend as well. Call and speak to the teacher and see what you can set up and see if you can set something up. But reach out, email, phone. In these days, if we're not really physically there, it may be, you know, they might have to work around that, but that's a way. It used to be in the old days before pandemic times, you might hang around the back door, and sometimes teachers come to the back door to dismiss their students, and you might say, you know what, this is what's happening. Can we set something up? But now in virtual times, you kind of have to go the email and or telephone route.
That's great. Thanks, Margot. Any other questions, comments? If you are looking for support with Hospice Simcoe, you can call our main number over at our Bell Farm Road location. You can speak to our office administrator, Doris, myself. The general number down there is 705, not 707. The first one says 707, but that's okay.
That's my error.
705, that's okay. I just saw that now. And typically Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, we're in the office, so you can speak with social worker or our office administrator, Doris, and we can get you set up for an intake. So somebody just asked, what do your children's grief programs look like? And when you get a referral, what does that process look like? So our children's grief programs are peer support. So the intake starts with a social worker. So Colleen or myself would start really doing that risk assessment, the bereavement screening, ensuring that the family has, you know, adequate support and that they're appropriate for our program. And then typically we would then either support the child ourselves, or we would match them with a volunteer like Margot. And then there would be 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the situation, of support provided. And that support, again, is not intended to replace professional counseling. It really is a peer-to-peer bereavement support. Lots of our volunteers come with lived experience, retired professionals, those sorts of things. And Colleen and myself support the matches. Any other questions? Well, you have our contact information, so if anything comes up after this presentation and you have more questions or you want to connect and talk about programming, Colleen and I are always open and happy to have a conversation. So thank you, Margot, so much for your time and your expertise. We couldn't do this without you, and this program is very special due to all that you bring to it. So thank you, Margot.
Thank you.
And yeah, everybody just reach out if you're needing support. We're always happy to help, okay?